What if the person everyone ignores holds the key to preventing disaster? That aircraft will kill you. Don't take off. The desperate cry pierced through the thunderous afternoon like lightning itself. Maya Rodriguez, clutching her worn cleaning supplies on the rain-soaked tarmac, watched as tech mogul Sebastian Kane barely glanced her way. His piercing blue eyes held nothing but contempt as he sneered. Security. Remove this. Distraction. How could someone dressed in a faded janitor's uniform possibly know anything about his million-dollar private jet? The scene that unfolded next would change everything. Not just for Sebastian, but for an entire industry built on dismissing the wrong voices. The storm begins. Rain cascaded down Maya's weathered cap as she stood her ground, water pooling around her scuffed work boots. Airport security rushed toward her like she was a threat to national security rather than a cleaning lady trying to save lives. "You're way out of line," barked Airport Supervisor David Collins, his voice dripping with authority he'd never earned through kindness. A glamorous news anchor, Victoria Sterling, leaned against her camera crew's van and laughed with theatrical cruelty. "This is giving me major disaster movie vibes," she announced to her cameraman, her perfectly manicured finger pointing mockingly. Anyone else seeing the irony? She looks absolutely serious about this. But what they couldn't see was Maya's eyes, fixed not on Sebastian's annoyed face, but on something far more dangerous. A thin stream of dark oil leaked steadily from the jet's pristine engine housing, creating an ominous trail on the wet pavement. Maya's trained gaze caught what everyone else missed. The telltale signs of catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Collins stormed over, his cheap umbrella trembling in his white-knuckled grip. "You want to keep your job?" he hissed, jabbing his finger dangerously close to her chest. "Stop spouting this ridiculous nonsense." From the gathering crowd, investment executive Marcus Blackwell adjusted his $1,000 tie and smirked. "Look at her uniform. She probably can't even afford technical training, let alone understand aerospace engineering." His words sparked ripples of laughter from the onlookers, hungry for drama on this dreary afternoon. Maya's lips parted as if she wanted to explain everything. The years of study, the family legacy, the expertise hidden beneath her humble exterior. But a security guard cut her off, roughly grabbing her arm. Sebastian Kane stood poised at the base of his jet's gleaming steps, flanked by his silver-haired legal advisor Thomas Wright and his sharp-tongued financial consultant Elena Voss, who rolled her eyes dramatically at Maya's rain-soaked appearance. "We're operating on a tight schedule," Elena murmured dismissively. "Let's ignore this theatrical display." Sebastian gave a curt nod, his gaze sliding over Maya's uniform with the kind of disdain reserved for unwanted interruptions. Then, without another word, he turned his back on her and climbed into his private aircraft. Collins delivered one final venomous glare. "I've warned you before, Rodriguez. Stay in your lane. You are here to clean floors, not spread your wild theories about million-dollar machinery." Thunder rumbled ominously overhead. What none of them knew was that Maya Rodriguez wasn't just any janitor. The secret behind the uniform as security dragged Maya away from the aircraft. Her shoes squeaking against the slick pavement, lightning illuminated her face in stark detail. For just a moment, there was something unmistakable in her expression. Not defeat, but the quiet strength of someone who knew exactly what they were talking about. She didn't plead or argue. Instead, she cast one final, penetrating look at the engine housing, exhaling softly as if memorizing every dangerous detail. Collins barked his final threat. "Open your mouth about this again, and you'll never work at this airport, or any other." The crowd of onlookers, now half hidden by the downpour, gave her withering looks before scattering to find shelter. When they vanished, the security guard finally released her grip. "You can't keep doing this," the guard muttered, tapping Maya's employee badge. "We have real responsibilities here, and you're not part of the elite class. You're stirring up unnecessary trouble." Maya kept her eyes downward, rainwater dripping from her lashes. The faint aroma of overheated metal still lingered in the air, a scent she inhaled as if it triggered something deep and unspoken within her memory. A memory of calloused hands showing her how to identify engine stress, of a workshop filled with revolutionary designs, of a father whose innovations once changed aviation forever. She turned toward the nearest maintenance closet, leaving only the ghostly imprint of her soaked footprints on the tarmac. Moments later, Sebastian's private jet roared down the runway, engines straining as it lifted into the storm-darkened sky. 20 minutes that changed everything. Maya spent the next 20 minutes in a secluded corner near the supply lockers, wringing out her jacket hem. Her shoes squeaked against the linoleum with every step, while a single flickering overhead light cast harsh shadows across her weathered face. She paused by a small staff table where employees typically filled out forms for lost luggage and damaged cargo. One battered clipboard remained, marked with the airport's official insignia. She touched its metal edge, her gaze lingering on the swirling logo as if it reminded her of something from another lifetime. The distant hum of aircraft filtered through the walls, a constant reminder of the world she worked in but never truly belonged to. An older maintenance worker in a stained vest shuffled past, shooting her a troubled look. He scratched the back of his neck and mumbled some half-hearted sympathy. "You holding up okay?" She nodded slightly, not trusting her voice to convey the storm of emotions inside. He shifted his weight uncomfortably, as if searching for more words. "People are saying you're causing problems. You sure this is worth the fight?" No response. She simply slid past him toward the staff rest area where she kept spare clothes. Water dripped from her cleaning bucket, leaving a trail that quickly faded under the harsh fluorescent lights. As she turned a corner, she froze. A subtle odor of engine grease and overheated metal drifted through the corridor from a distant air intake vent. Suddenly, her father's hands came to mind, hands that had once shown her how to tighten a bolt, how to spot an oil leak before it became deadly. She remembered the slight tremor in his left wrist when he tested aircraft components, a nervous habit that revealed his perfectionist nature. The memory passed as quickly as it came. She inhaled once more, carefully, as if verifying that the dangerous smell was still there. Then she lifted her chin and continued down the hallway. Outside, the rain intensified, turning runway lights into blurred halos of color. The disaster unfolds inside Sebastian's private jet. The tech mogul sipped mineral water while ignoring the turbulence, engrossed in a heated discussion with Thomas Wright about a contract requiring his signature. A flash of irritation crossed his features as he recalled that drenched woman's desperate scream, but he dismissed it with a quick shake of his head. If only he had listened. 5 minutes later, the plane lurched violently. The pilot's previously calm voice shifted to barely controlled urgency. Indicators show rapidly rising engine temperature. We have a critical malfunction developing. Static cut off any further explanation. The aircraft jolted again, more violently this time, sending Elena's laptop sliding across the polished table. Sebastian's water glass toppled and shattered against the plush carpet. Panic flickered in Thomas Wright's eyes as he braced himself against the leather seat. Another violent jolt shook the cabin. Alarms shrieked through the passenger area. "We are experiencing critical engine failure," the pilot's voice crackled, strained but professional. "Requesting immediate emergency landing clearance." Repeat, immediate clearance required. The emergency landing at the airport, the control tower radio exploded with frantic communications. Sebastian's plane circled back toward the runway, trailing an ominous line of dark smoke. Fire trucks and ambulances mobilized instantly, their lights reflecting off the rain-soaked tarmac like scattered jewels. Maya stood at a terminal window, her shoulders rigid with tension. Other staff members crowded around, murmuring half to themselves and half to each other. "Is that the same jet?" "The tech mogul's plane." A hush rippled through the group as they watched the aircraft descend unsteadily. The pilot battled fierce winds and engine failure until, with a final grinding of tortured metal, the wheels touched down hard. The plane careened across the slick runway, smoke billowing from beneath one wing, before grinding to an abrupt halt. Fire crews rushed forward, their foam cannons already blasting. Maya stepped back from the window. Her face remained expressionless, though the staff around her surged forward with exclamations of shock and disbelief. She made no move to join them. Instead, she turned on her heel and disappeared down the corridor, as if wanting no part in the spectacle. But her absence spoke louder than words. An older baggage handler muttered in disbelief. She was right, wasn't she? Another worker, arms crossed tightly, swallowed hard. We should have listened. The media frenzy within minutes. News cameras arrived like vultures sensing fresh drama. Reporters converged outside the terminal, jostling for position under dripping umbrellas. Victoria Sterling, the same anchor who had mocked Maya earlier, now stood disheveled with her hair plastered to her forehead. She spoke breathlessly into her microphone, wide-eyed with the drama of near disaster. As paramedics led the shaken Sebastian onto the runway, cameras captured every moment. The tech mogul looked furious rather than grateful, his immaculate suit stained with spilled water and streaks of soot. The glint in his eyes suggested a man who rarely faced vulnerability and liked it even less. Fire officials and airport authorities huddled in urgent discussion. Collins, the same supervisor who had berated Maya, now looked paler than the fluorescent lights overhead. He listened to the urgent chatter of Aviation Inspector Dr. Patricia Yamamoto. There's a severe fault in the engine. Oil leak, compromised wiring. If they'd stayed airborne another 1,000 feet. She paused, pressing her lips together grimly. It might have been catastrophic. Collins's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his superiors. He glanced around, visibly rattled. The entire crisis was unfolding under bright camera lights and the looming presence of scandal-hungry reporters. The irony was delicious and deadly. The headlines that changed everything that night. Local news stations broke the story with sensational headlines. Tech mogul nearly dies after ignoring janitor's warning. The footage showed Maya, drenched and desperate, shouting on the tarmac before being dragged away by security. This was followed immediately by dramatic shots of Sebastian's damaged aircraft trailing smoke. Within hours, the story spread to radio broadcasts and major newspapers. Media pundits feasted on the irony. A wealthy mogul dismissing a humble janitor who turned out to be absolutely right. The airport's PR department scrambled to control the narrative, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, Maya clocked out quietly, slipping past the throng of press through a back exit. Her footsteps echoed in the deserted corridor, the overhead lights buzzing and revealing her reflection in a glass panel. Tired eyes, uniform stained with rain and grime. But there was something else in her reflection. Quiet dignity that no amount of mockery could touch. Outside, a black sedan with tinted windows idled at the curb. Maya paused, noticing the silhouette of a uniformed driver inside. A fleeting tension flickered in her eyes, but she walked right past it, choosing instead to head to the bus stop. As she sank onto the bench, arms folded against the evening chill, she stared at a flickering street lamp that reminded her of an old workshop light. She exhaled slowly, as if recalling the familiar hum of an air compressor and the clang of metal tools on concrete. Glimpses of a past she never spoke about. The morning after the next morning, the airport swarmed with media vans and camera crews. Dozens of microphones thrust forward at the staff entrance as people arrived for work. Collins, bleary-eyed and desperate, tried to slip inside unnoticed, but reporters cornered him immediately. "Sir, is it true you called her warning ridiculous nonsense?" One shouted. "Any comment on how you plan to handle the responsibility?" Pressed another. He spluttered a prepared statement about internal investigations and employee training protocols. But his words rang hollow. Meanwhile, employees whispered in hushed clusters, scanning the crowd for signs of Maya. She arrived with her head down, wearing the same faded uniform, freshly laundered overnight, but still humble. A cluster of reporters spotted her and rushed forward like hunting dogs. "Ms. Rodriguez, how did you know the plane was dangerous? Are you secretly an aircraft mechanic? Is it true you once studied aerospace engineering?" She froze for a split second, the swirl of voices closing in like a rush of wind. Security guards tried to form a protective barrier, but the reporters pressed forward, jostling each other for better camera angles. Collins barked orders for her to keep walking, but a persistent cameraman blocked her path. Maya remained silent, her eyes distant and unfocused. Then, without warning, she sidestepped the entire crowd, weaving through them with uncanny ease, as though their presence hardly mattered. Why wasn't she speaking? What was she hiding? A braver reporter trailed after her, breathless. "Ms. Rodriguez, please. Just one statement." Maya halted, glanced at him once with those calm, knowing eyes, and resumed her path. The only sound was the quiet scuff of her shoes against the polished terminal floor. The investigation begins inside the terminal. Officials from the Federal Aviation Board conducted a rigorous inspection. Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, a distinguished investigator in a pinstripe suit, read an official statement to a small group of staff. Based on preliminary findings, the fault in Mr. Kane's aircraft aligns precisely with the area Ms. Maya Rodriguez reportedly identified. Investigations continue, but we must note that had her warning been heeded, an emergency landing might have been avoided entirely. The staff listened with wide eyes. Some cast sideways glances at Maya, remembering how they had ignored or openly mocked her concerns. Sebastian Kane remained elusive, sequestered in private meetings with his legal team. Rumor had it that he was furious at the mechanical failure, at the media storm, at his brush with death. But there was also whispered speculation that he'd initiated a comprehensive background check on Maya Rodriguez. People said his empire was built on controlling every angle of every story, so naturally he wanted to know who had nearly derailed his carefully crafted narrative. In the staff break room, flight attendant Jessica Martinez mentioned seeing a man in an expensive tailored suit examining old HR records, verifying Maya's full employment history. Another worker added that she'd spotted Collins practically groveling outside the CEO's temporary office, desperate to save his own career. By lunchtime, major news networks had established permanent positions near the airport gates, hoping for an exclusive statement from the woman who had saved a tech mogul's life. But Maya continued avoiding cameras by navigating through service hallways, carrying her mop and bucket as if nothing had changed. The hidden truth emerges that evening as the sun dipped low behind storm clouds. An unexpected summons arrived. Dr. Yamamoto requested Maya's presence in a makeshift conference room near Gate 22. Maya entered cautiously. The room was furnished with a long table, scattered chairs, and a cluster of serious-looking officials. Harsh overhead lights cast sharp shadows across polished surfaces. She recognized Dr. Yamamoto, Collins fidgeting nervously in a corner, and, at the far end of the table, Sebastian Kane himself. He leaned back with arms folded, projecting cold fury tempered by curiosity. Thomas Wright stood at his elbow, flipping through a thick file. "Please sit," Dr. Yamamoto said, gesturing to a single chair positioned in the center of the room. Maya complied, clasping her hands quietly in her lap. The investigator cleared her throat. "Ms. Rodriguez, can you detail exactly how you came to suspect the engine malfunction?" Silence. Collins rolled his eyes, tension bunching his shoulders like a man expecting to be fired. Dr. Yamamoto tried a gentler approach. "We're aware you may have had some technical training, some background experience perhaps." Maya glanced at the officials, then settled her gaze on an open file. A photograph of her was clipped to what appeared to be an employment transcript. Sebastian's voice cut through the uneasy quiet like a blade. "We found an old employment application to Kane Aerospace Systems from several years ago." His tone was clipped, as if forcing out each word. Application denied due to insufficient professional references. Is that correct? The supervisor's eyes flicked between them, realization slowly dawning. Maya's silence persisted, but a faint flush colored her cheeks. Dr. Yamamoto continued, consulting her documents. Your father's name appears on multiple patents for advanced turbine cooling systems. That's accurate, isn't it? The flicker in Maya's eyes said everything. Yes. Collins shifted uncomfortably, looking genuinely ill. Sebastian exhaled, pushing back from the table. You're not just some random janitor, are you? She offered the smallest shake of her head, still refusing to elaborate. I had no idea, Collins stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Yamamoto read from an official document. According to these records, Ms. Rodriguez graduated top of her aerospace engineering program with highest honors. Her withdrawal was sudden. Family financial crisis, we're told. The room fell silent as the revelations settled like dust after an explosion. Sebastian's voice dropped, no longer quite as confident. Why are you here then? Why are you cleaning floors? Maya didn't answer, but the dull set of her eyes hinted at a story far deeper than their curiosity could reach. Dr. Yamamoto cleared her throat diplomatically. Regardless of personal circumstances, Ms. Rodriguez, you identified the exact fault that nearly caused a catastrophic disaster. We owe you a profound gratitude. Collins coughed awkwardly. This woman prevented unimaginable loss of life and protected this airport from a public relations nightmare. The investigator continued, turning toward the stern group of officials. Sebastian's lips pressed into a thin line. A moment passed where no one even dared to blink. Then he nodded stiffly. Kane Industries will issue a formal statement acknowledging Ms. Rodriguez for her timely insight. Even that lukewarm concession felt forced, but the investigators seemed relieved. The unexpected offer days later. The media frenzy reached fever pitch. Every major outlet clamored for an exclusive interview with the mysterious janitor-turned-hero. Maya's strategy of slipping through side corridors and staff-only areas became her new normal. Though cameras occasionally caught glimpses of her determined stride, always with cleaning supplies in hand, as if those humble tools were her shield against unwanted attention. A wave of public sentiment built around her story. Passengers whispered her name while waiting in ticket lines. Some employees who had once sneered at her now murmured awkward thanks or avoided her gaze entirely. Victoria Sterling, the reporter who had mocked her with disaster movie vibes, managed to corner Maya by the staff vending machines one afternoon. Ms. Rodriguez, the world wants to hear your story. You saved a plane full of VIPs. Are you proud? Do you have any regrets? Maya pressed the button for a bottle of water, took it, and walked away without a word. The reporter stood there, momentarily stunned. Is that all you have to say? She called after her. No response. The deeper investigation, a respected investigative journalist began digging deeper into Maya's background, unearthing details that painted an even more intriguing picture. A prestigious preparatory school education, a father renowned for revolutionary aviation patents, an unexpected connection to a powerful maternal lineage involved in quiet philanthropic endeavors. Rumored to be linked to one of the region's wealthiest families, former teachers described Maya as brilliant but intensely private, recalling how she vanished from academic circles after her father's financial empire collapsed overnight. These revelations sparked a new wave of fascination. Why would someone with that background end up pushing a mop in an airport terminal? Sebastian Kane found himself forced to address the swelling public interest. Shareholders demanded explanations about how a potentially fatal flaw in one of his aircraft went unnoticed until a janitor intervened. The incident threatened to tarnish his reputation for maintaining impeccable safety standards. He released a carefully crafted public apology during a high-profile press conference. We deeply regret dismissing Ms. Rodriguez's concerns. Her keen observation prevented a tragedy, and for that, we owe her our sincere gratitude. But behind the scenes, rumor had it that he was far from satisfied. He was a man accustomed to controlling narratives, and now this narrative was controlling him. The life-changing proposal before the day ended. Airport loudspeakers announced that Maya Rodriguez was requested in the main terminal conference room. She arrived to find Sebastian Kane seated at a polished table, flanked by corporate lawyers and Victoria Sterling. Though the reporter now wore a more respectful expression. The lawyers had opened briefcases containing thick contracts, while Victoria held a pen and notepad, her cameraman positioned discreetly nearby. Sebastian's gaze remained guarded, but he offered Maya a seat. He introduced her to the group in subdued tones, explaining that Kane Industries was prepared to offer her an unprecedented position: Global Aviation Safety Director. Victoria's eyes gleamed with excitement, scribbling notes for what would undoubtedly become tomorrow's headline. A hush settled as everyone waited for Maya's reaction. She let her fingertips trace the edge of the thick contract placed before her. The legal text outlined an extraordinary salary, more than most CEOs earned annually, plus complete authority to inspect any Kane-owned aircraft at any time, anywhere in the world. It was an unprecedented display of humility from a corporate giant. Collins hovered by the doorway, his face pale as he seemed to brace himself for her response, perhaps remembering every time he had publicly humiliated her. Victoria, desperate for exclusive content, finally blurted, "Ms. Rodriguez, how do you feel about this offer? Will you accept a position worth more than most people see in a lifetime?" Still, Maya did not speak. Her calm, unwavering eyes drifted to Collins. He avoided her gaze, beads of nervous sweat gathering at his hairline. Then she looked directly at Sebastian, who watched her intently, with arms folded across his chest. At length, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper. She placed it on the table. It was worn at the edges, the ink slightly faded. It read, "Application for Kane Aerospace Systems, rejected." Next to it were faded scribbles of her father's old safety designs, innovative concepts that had been ahead of their time. Victoria's pen paused mid-scratch. Sebastian's expression hardened as he recognized his company's letterhead. The room fell completely silent. Maya placed a fingertip on one particular scribbled note, highlighting an annotation about establishing a universal technical education fund. Then, in a voice neither loud nor meek, she finally spoke. "I have one condition." Everyone leaned closer, spellbound by this rare moment of hearing her voice. She indicated the faded note with the edge of her fingernail. "Establish a permanent fund for low-income women pursuing technical careers. Make it permanent." Her tone was level, carrying an unspoken authority that dared anyone to refuse. Victoria's eyes darted to Sebastian, eager to witness his response. Collins seemed on the verge of fainting. Sebastian sat back, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. "A permanent fund?" he repeated slowly. Maya didn't elaborate. She offered no sales pitch, no justification, simply stared at him with the kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing you're absolutely right. Around the table, lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Victoria scribbled furiously. Finally, Sebastian nodded, though his posture revealed he was caught completely off guard. "If that's your requirement," he said carefully, "then consider it done." A faint flicker of satisfaction crossed Maya's face. Satisfaction without pride. She pushed the thick contract away from her. Victoria cleared her throat. "So you'll accept the position?" A moment of silence. Then Maya inclined her head in agreement. Collins released the breath he'd been holding. Victoria could barely contain her excitement, her pen dancing across the page as a new headline formed in her mind. From janitor to global director. The quiet revolution, the transformation cameras flashed as Sebastian rose, beckoning his legal team forward to modify the contract terms. He didn't look pleased exactly, but there was unmistakable respect in his eyes. Thomas Wright typed furiously on his laptop, adding comprehensive clauses about the education fund's establishment and management. When the final agreement was prepared, Maya stood to sign it. Victoria pounced with one final question. "Ms. Rodriguez, why do all this? Why live as a janitor when you possess these extraordinary qualifications?" Maya's gaze slipped toward the half-open conference room door, where a fleeting memory seemed to hover. An old silhouette of her father leaning on a walking cane, surrounded by half-assembled prototypes in a workshop that financial collapse had claimed. The memory flickered in her eyes, but she said nothing. Instead, she walked toward the exit, each step measured and purposeful, leaving the journalist to craft stories about quiet dignity and hidden strength. The ripple effect news spread like wildfire. The next morning's newspapers splashed her photograph across front pages nationwide. Maya Rodriguez's silent triumph. The janitor who saved lives and transformed an empire. At the airport, staff gossip was replaced by genuine awe. People who had once insulted her found themselves offering stammering apologies. She accepted none of their words, simply continuing her routine, though now everyone understood she was far from ordinary. A wealthy patron, overhearing the full story, muttered, "Must be nice to have hidden advantages." But even his attempt at dismissiveness couldn't hide the envy in his voice. In the weeks that followed, Kane Industries announced the Education Fund's official launch, featuring press releases about their new Global Aviation Safety Director. University administrators and philanthropic organizations lined up to express support for scholarships that would lift countless women into engineering and technical careers. Sebastian Kane, thrust unwillingly into the spotlight alongside Maya, discovered that the public was fascinated by this narrative of transformation. A cold CEO humbled by the quiet woman he had so callously dismissed. Additional revelations about Maya's background continued trickling out. Her father's once great fortune, the philanthropic connections of her maternal family, her deliberate choice to live simply, uninterested in society's status games. This knowledge sent waves of shame through those who had mocked her. Collins, who had once spat insults, found himself under internal review for his treatment of employees. Victoria Sterling, whose name became synonymous with premature judgment, lost credibility among her media peers. Even airport executives who had turned blind eyes to workplace harassment faced severe rebuke from higher-ups, distanced by colleagues who wanted no association with the fallout. The new dynamic Sebastian, for his part, maintained measured distance from Maya. Their professional interactions remained polite and formal, but the corporate world whispered about his bruised pride. How a single moment of arrogance had nearly cost him his life and completely upended his carefully managed public image. Yet there was also speculation that he genuinely admired her unwavering principles, her refusal to be swayed by influence or money. On one occasion, he attempted to thank her privately, presenting a rare engineering textbook from a defunct publisher as a token of appreciation. She accepted it with a slight bow of her head, flipping through its yellowed pages thoughtfully. After a moment, she closed it and left the room without a word, leaving him to wonder if she had offered him any forgiveness at all. The speaking circuit universities began inviting Maya as a guest speaker. Flight schools requested her expertise for safety protocol lectures. Initially, she refused every invitation. She had no interest in spotlight or fame. But her new contract with Kane Industries required occasional public appearances. So with the quiet grace that now defined her legend, she stepped onto stages at technical colleges, standing before lecture halls filled with wide-eyed students, some recognizing her from news coverage, others from whispered rumors. She offered minimal remarks, allowing official hosts to handle most presentations. Still, the few words she spoke carried more weight than 1,000 traditional lectures. Campus walls soon displayed posters featuring Maya, the woman who spoke up and changed everything. She found the attention embarrassing, but students adored her, seeing in her story a living testament that sometimes the quiet, overlooked individuals among us hold the greatest power. Senior audience members stood to applaud her, tears in their eyes, as they remembered their own times of being dismissed or silenced. Maya offered them gentle nods, her form of acknowledgement and solidarity. The grand unveiling, a pivotal moment, arrived when Kane Industries organized an elaborate unveiling of the new scholarship program at an ornate city ballroom. The venue was draped in elegant velvet curtains, filled with wealthy donors, politicians, and distinguished educators. Maya stood near the back, wearing a simple black dress that contrasted starkly with the glittering designer gowns surrounding her. She could sense the immediate hush that fell over the crowd as people recognized her. A donor's wife nudged her husband, eyebrows raised in recognition. A prominent CEO paused mid-sip of his champagne, staring. Curiosity and respect swirled through the air like expensive perfume. Sebastian took the stage with measured gravitas, delivering prepared remarks about progress, innovation, and the critical need for inclusivity in aerospace industries. Cameras panned across the audience before he introduced Maya Rodriguez, inviting her to the front of the ballroom. A profound hush fell over the gathering. She approached with steady steps, hands clasped professionally. Sebastian extended an official plaque proclaiming her not just an employee, but a cornerstone of Kane Industries' new era of safety and equality. Applause burst from the crowd, but she stood perfectly still, every line of her posture composed and dignified. When the clapping subsided, she spoke just enough to convey sincere gratitude for the scholarship fund's establishment. Then, with a slight inclination of her head, she signaled that her remarks were complete. Attendees soon clustered around her, each wanting to connect with this phenomenon. She navigated their attention with polite nods and brief acknowledgments, understanding instinctively that her real work wasn't in grand ballrooms, but in the technical details of engines and the empowerment of those who lacked opportunity. Eventually, she drifted away from the crowd, stepping onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city's twinkling lights. She paused at the railing, letting the distant hum of traffic wash over her. A cherished memory flickered. The old workshop behind her childhood home, scattered with engine parts her father collected, the familiar tang of machine oil that would cling to his work coat. A gentle reminder that no one is too insignificant to notice a flaw that could lead to disaster. She breathed in the night air, remembering how he once laid a caring hand on her shoulder, nodding as if to pass on everything he knew about precision, integrity, and speaking truth, regardless of who might be listening. The Cultural Revolution in the days that followed, the cultural shift at Kane Industries became unmistakable. New employees were actively encouraged to voice concerns openly. Motivational posters lined hallways. Speak up, be heard, safety for all. Collins, who had tormented Maya, was quietly reassigned to a lesser position, replaced by someone with an established reputation for integrity and employee respect. Victoria Sterling found her media contract non-renewed, her network choosing a more thoughtful correspondent. Throughout the airport, employees exchanged glances of relief. As if an oppressive atmosphere had finally lifted, Maya's presence remained somewhat mysterious. She moved through the facility with the same quiet composure, but now wearing a simple ID badge reading Global Aviation Safety Director. Her janitor's uniform was replaced with understated business attire. Still modest, without any hint of luxury or pretension. People who had once mocked her now stepped aside respectfully. A few attempted to build friendships, but she maintained polite distance, responding with courteous brevity. She attended high-level meetings, sometimes with Sebastian himself, analyzing safety protocols with the thoroughness of someone who understood that lives depended on getting every detail right. Her voice in these meetings was steady, her proposals direct, each suggestion reflecting comprehensive knowledge gleaned from both her father's teachings and her own refined expertise. The scholarship recipients' months passed, and the newly established education fund began distributing its first scholarships to promising young women aspiring to become engineers, mechanics, and inventors. Photographs of the initial recipients circulated through social media. Bright-eyed teenagers brimming with gratitude for opportunities they never expected to receive. In a small ceremony, a group of them gathered to meet Maya in person, shyly presenting handmade thank you notes and cards. She accepted their gifts with a quiet smile, only the faintest glimmer of deep emotion shining in her eyes. Sebastian observed all of this from the periphery, arms folded. He still harbored a sense of displacement, unsure how to reconcile the massive transformation he had unwittingly triggered. Whenever he caught Maya's eye during corporate functions, he offered a respectful nod, not quite an apology, not quite regret, but something approaching genuine respect. She would return the gesture with equal dignity. The tension between them was that of two powerful forces coexisting in careful alliance. She had no desire to humiliate him further. He had no intention of underestimating her again. The personal mystery rumors inevitably sprang up about Maya's private life. Some speculated she was secretly married into an even wealthier family. Others whispered about a fiancé overseas or theorized that her exiled father had once been the pinnacle of aerospace innovation. Tabloids teased sensational headlines but never found definitive proof. When asked directly, Maya offered no explanations. She simply carried her quiet dignity like impenetrable armor, completely unaffected by gossip or speculation. The mystery only deepened her legend. The next generation speaks up one afternoon. While inspecting a newly updated engine model, Maya paused at the end of a bustling maintenance corridor. The familiar hum of power tools and clang of machinery echoed around her, sounds that had become the soundtrack of her transformation. She heard a voice call her name, soft and hesitant. Turning, she saw a young woman in a mechanic's jumpsuit, one of the new hires who had been emboldened by the cultural shift at Kane Industries. The woman admitted she had serious doubts about a turbine alignment, but had been afraid to bring it up, worried about seeming incompetent or overstepping her authority. Maya approached the engine, ran a gloved hand over the metal components, and nodded thoughtfully. The issue was real and potentially dangerous. By confirming the woman's concern, she prevented the design team from a costly, and potentially deadly, error. The young mechanic blinked back tears of gratitude, swallowing hard at the realization that her voice had been heard and valued. This was the cultural revolution in action. No one's insight dismissed simply because of rank, background, or appearance. The shareholders' applause in the final days of that quarter, a distinguished group of shareholders gathered to celebrate Kane Industries' robust profits and dramatically improved public image. Maya was invited to present the safety improvements to the board. Performance metrics, new protocols, decreased incident reports. She delivered only the essentials with characteristic precision and brevity. The shareholders, many of whom had once scoffed at suggestions from lower-level staff, offered her a standing ovation. Yet she seemed untouched by their applause, as though her mind was already focused on the next set of challenges. After the meeting, Sebastian approached her outside the boardroom, hands casually in his pockets. "You've accomplished something remarkable here," he said quietly, glancing down the hallway where employees now moved without fear of voicing legitimate concerns. She allowed a slight tilt of her head, acknowledging his comment. He hesitated, as if searching for words that might bridge the remaining gap between them. Instead, he handed her a folder. Final approval needed for the next round of scholarship beneficiaries. She signed it without flourish, handing it back. For a moment, their eyes met, and there was mutual understanding. The invisible line that had once divided them had shifted permanently. Neither could return to who they had been before that stormy afternoon. The memorial weeks later, a solemn ceremony was held at the airport itself, unveiling a memorial plaque honoring those who had lost their lives in past aviation tragedies, coupled with a new installation celebrating those who speak up to save lives. Maya stood quietly as a small group read the inscriptions aloud. A respectful hush spread when people recognized her presence among the attendees. She stepped forward, placing a single white rose at the foot of the memorial display. Photographers captured the moment, but she stayed only long enough to pay her respects before slipping back into the crowd. Even in moments of recognition, she remained true to her nature, humble, purposeful, and private. Home that evening, Maya arrived home to a modest apartment. far from the luxury condos that might have been expected for someone in her elevated position. She set down her work bag, stepping carefully around half-finished sketches of an improved fuel valve design. By the wall, a single-framed photograph of her parents overlooked the living space. Her father in his workshop clothes, her mother in a simple blouse. No signs of their hidden wealth or philanthropic connections. Just two people with unmistakable integrity shining in their eyes. Maya paused, meeting their gaze through the glass. Her shoulders relaxed as though some invisible weight had finally lifted. She had honored their memory and their values. The legacy takes root time rolled forward, and the narrative of the janitor who saved a tech mogul became required reading in leadership seminars and university courses worldwide. Business professors explained how one voice, initially drowned out by prejudice and arrogance, nearly changed the fate of an entire corporation. Students wrote essays and debated the ethics of ignoring frontline workers. Meanwhile, the staff at the airport had settled into their new normal. Employees came forward more frequently with safety concerns, creating a genuinely collaborative workplace. Sebastian's empire continued expanding, but its leadership style had evolved, forever shaped by the lesson learned on that stormy day. The anniversary a year later, on the anniversary of the near disaster, a commemorative ceremony took place in the main terminal. Sebastian Kane, flanked by executives and board members, stood to address staff, reporters, and scholarship recipients. He spoke candidly about how arrogance had nearly cost him his life, and how a single warning, dismissed at first, became the catalyst for a cultural revolution. Cameras panned to Maya, standing just off stage. She wore a reserved smile, though her posture radiated quiet authority and confidence. When the ceremony concluded, the crowd dispersed with handshakes and photo opportunities. Maya lingered by a large window overlooking the runway. Raindrops began speckling the glass, reminding her of that fateful stormy afternoon when she first shouted, "That aircraft will kill you. Don't take off." She closed her eyes for the briefest moment, letting the memory wash over her. The security guard's mocking laughter, Collins's venomous threats, Sebastian's cold, dismissive stare. Then she reopened her eyes, focusing on a sleek new aircraft taxiing into position. The letters K for Kane Industries gleamed on its tail, a testament to the future it carried, shaped in part by her unwavering stand. A profound sense of calm settled in her chest. Everything set into motion that day had led here. An unstoppable chain reaction fueled by her refusal to stay silent. She pressed her palm lightly against the cool glass as the plane lifted gracefully into the sky, engines roaring with well-maintained, carefully inspected power. The next generation of pilots, mechanics, and engineers, especially those from humble backgrounds, would have opportunities to stand where she now stood, unhindered by superficial judgments. The quiet revolution continues as Maya made her way through the airport halls, passing travelers rushing to their flights. No one stopped her for autographs anymore. She had found her measure of peace among colleagues who had learned to value her presence as something far more significant than curiosity. She would remain that calm, watchful guardian behind the scenes, ensuring no engine whine or oil streak went unnoticed ever again. She left the building, stepping into a gentle drizzle that felt almost comforting. The raindrops carried echoes of old struggles and quiet triumphs. She glanced at the distant city skyline, where steel outlines of skyscrapers reflected millions of unnamed stories of people fighting to be heard. Then she took a measured step toward her parked car, an unremarkable sedan that suited her perfectly, and slid into the driver's seat. The silence inside felt like a gentle embrace. Sometimes, in these quiet moments, she allowed herself to think of all those who had doubted her worth. They had receded now, like shadows in a room suddenly flooded with light. She hadn't sought revenge or demanded public apologies. The world had shifted around her, delivering natural consequences in ways only social transformation could manage. Lost status, broken professional relationships, severed business deals. She had simply carried on, letting her actions speak louder than any words ever could. Rain tapped gently on the windshield, reminding her of her father's patient voice and her mother's unwavering moral example. She breathed slowly, letting gratitude fill the peaceful silence. Then, with a turn of the key, her engine purred, reliable and steady, like everything else in her carefully constructed life. The eternal echo pulling out of the parking lot, Maya drove away from the airport, leaving behind a legacy of transformation that continued taking root in every corridor, every hangar, every new scholarship offered to young women who might change the world someday. We never truly know whose voice will prevent disaster. We never truly see the depth behind a modest uniform. Sometimes a quiet observation and a single warning can shift the course of an entire corporation, even save precious lives. But more importantly, it can plant a seed. A reminder that every person carries worth beyond measure. In the gathering darkness of evening, her story continues, passing from one generation to another, showing how a simple word of caution, spoken by someone nearly invisible, can echo through boardrooms and engine bays alike. A caution to never underestimate the quiet ones, for they might hold the keys to our greatest salvation. When the next wave of storms rolls in, people remember Maya Rodriguez, standing in the rain, cleaning supplies in hand, shouting a warning that no one wanted to hear. They recall how that single voice saved so many lives and changed the trajectory of an empire. It's a memory that rises to the surface whenever doubt creeps in, an invitation to speak up, to listen more carefully, and to believe that behind even the humblest appearance can lie a force that protects us all. May we each carry that lesson forward with dignity and courage, never silenced by fear or dismissed by arrogance. May we find in her story the strength to speak our truth and the wisdom to listen when others do the same. May we remember that sometimes the only thing separating catastrophe from hope is a quiet voice in the storm, and the wisdom to heed its warning. If this story resonated with something deep within you, perhaps it's time to share that reminder with someone who needs to hear it. A single moment of recognition can spark the next conversation, the next transformation. Let that echo be heard.